Good morning, gentlemen. When was the first time you heard about Dillinger Escape Plan?
I heard of Dillinger Escape Plan in 2004, I believe. I was doing a Baroque music festival in Princeton University, and I went to the Princeton Record Exchange and was sifting through the used bin, and somebody apparently decided they didn't like the album Miss Machine. Intrigued, I bought it. I was forever changed.
How so? What was your first favorite song of theirs on that album?
Panasonic Youth. I didn't know what to make of it. It made no sense. Yet, it all made sense.
Indeed. Joseph?
I was in high school, and now I feel old. And Calculate Infinity had been out for a little bit. I had found it at a local record, kind of the same deal, and found it in the used bin. Looked pretty cool, just kind of desperate for new music. And when I hit play and that Sugar Coated Sour comes on, you're just like, oh, this is what Panic sounds like through my ears. And then I saw like a live video and was like, oh, these guys are pretty athletic, huh? Kind of stuck.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah, same. I discovered Calculating in high school, and 43% Burnt. It's like always my song, so still one of my faves.
Classic?
Classic, yeah. How about you, Ben?
I first heard the Dillinger Escape Plan. I immediately got into it after seeing them perform with Mike Patton on the Mr. Bungle tour. I said, what is this skullduggery? What is this nonsense? It sounded like noise. I gave it another shot. Nope, don't get it. Gave it another shot. Nope, don't get it. Boom, Miss Machine comes out. I hear Unretrified. I said, now that's a tune. That's a tune I can snap my fingers to, and I've never looked back. Now I'm into the full catalog, and actually Calculate Infinity is really the only thing I will listen to.
You sound like a poser, Ben.
Excuse me, this is supposed to be a fancy orchestra stuff?
So, Ben and Earl, tell me how you two met and how this idea for a 10-year anniversary string album came about.
So what happened was, my 7 sons did an arrangement of 43, and we didn't think, like I said, we already talked about it. I was already a fan, and I just love the music, and part of 7 Sons' thing is translating, hardcore and metal and extreme music in general into a string quartet format. And I had done this arrangement, and we worked it out, and I liked how it sounded at rehearsal, and I just, on a one-off, decided to film it, and, we didn't even give a shit. It was just, it was my kid's birthday party the day before. We had, pink balloons all along the thing, there was zero thought into this little rehearsal film, and I just put the camera on, and we just ran through it, and I posted it just because I thought, hey, this is, sounds great, sounds like pretty cool and whatever. And Ben slid into my DMs.
Classic story.
Slid into my DMs. And he just said, I see you guys have a show. Do you mind if I come down? And I'm like, does the Catholic Church touch little boys? Yeah, man. Definitely.
The answer is yeah.
The answer is yeah. So come down. And him and Billy came down. We had a show at LPR, and they came down, and the rest is kind of history. We just kind of hit it off and started making music and doing that shit. So that's how it started.
Yeah, there's a couple things in the trajectory of the career that really made me feel like maybe something I'm doing is worthwhile. And it was usually something like one of my heroes, like giving accolades, like some artist I grew up listening to, being like, "You guys are dope," or like, you know, seeing that they dig the band in an article or something like that. I'm like, okay, maybe this is cool. But you guys playing that song was one of them.
Oh man.
Too, because like hearing it in that format in like such a, you know, I have no idea what I'm doing. You know, I'm just making music, and like these people dissect it. You know, and like people at Berkeley are like doing courses on like the theory, and like, you know, it's all. And when I hear it in that way, I'm like, oh, okay, this is, maybe I'm not an idiot. Maybe there's something here. But like, you know, obviously, the truth is, obviously, you know, as you know, like every note has a purpose in these songs. But it's so great to hear that purpose translates to somebody else as well, and that you guys were able to translate it into your thing. And so that was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, that's. I mean, we would not have tried, I think, if we already didn't natively realize that there was a lot of depth and a lot of like, there's definitely things to explore beyond the immediately visceral nature of the music. You know.
I have a question for you, actually. So, as someone who's so trained and skilled, yeah, I mean, you're a natural virtuoso, but and a delicious, handsome young man as well. But as somebody who's dissected and played and so much music of all genres, from all the, you know, like the Jewish music you do at weddings that's extremely technical, to the classical stuff, to the metal stuff that you've transposed and transcribed. Like, what did you find from, I guess, like a music theory basis that seemed like interesting consistence or patterns or things when you listened to this music and learned all the parts? And
Well, I think I think there's little music out there that so accurately and deeply conveys a certain emotional color. Oversimplified, it's like anxiety or like just chaos and anxiety, but does it in this almost secretly ordered way. But I don't know. For me, Dillinger has always been kind of the sonic equivalent of like sort of cubist, like Picasso kind of stuff, because it's like how you take a picture and then and then you just smash it, right? But like all the inherent parts are actually still, it was this, but it's broken in this kind of a way. So that's my takeaway of what, I know these are sort of big, gross simplifications in a way, but I think if I were to really kind of try to put a general statement to it, it's a completely unique take on a certain emotional color that doesn't get explored very often, and it gets explored in your way. And Dillinger explores it in a way that no music really does. It's
well,
unique.
that's interesting. Thank you. But I'm curious because like a lot of people, I've watched a lot of like reviews of like Calculating Infinity by the composers and producers and stuff. There seems to be this whole thing of that on YouTube now, where like, you know, like some old composer listens to songs and gives a reaction or whatever.
Right.
And like, you know, like a lot of the ones who are really accomplished and really know what they're doing, they really should get it. You know, or they at least acknowledge that they don't get certain things, but they know there's some logic there, and they'd like to explore it more. But, you know, as someone like you who dissected it, all the different parts, the polyrhythms, the weird, you know, dissonance, the harmonies, the lack of harmonies, you know what I mean, the extended measures, the rhythms, the time signatures. Did you learn anything surprising about like some of the theory in that. You know what I mean? Like, did anything get revealed to you that you didn't really, because a lot of people just hear it as like a barrage of things getting thrown at them. It's just like they're just getting pummeled. And like, I know it's more than that. You know what I mean? But to them, that's just how it hits them. And I'm wondering if someone like you who had to sit there and break it apart, and like, was there, like, what was, I'm curious, like someone like you who dissects a lot of complex classical music and things like that, what things were interesting to you, like theoretically or like.
Well, I'm not gonna speak theoretically because that's just boring shit. Like, I'm not gonna say, your use of the submedian harmony and like whatever. That's just
okay. Yeah,
that's
I wouldn't know what you're talking.
That's about. Like smart people jerking off. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like intellectual people jerking off, which I don't have much use for either. But what my takeaway from like really kind of deeply getting into it, and you really, if like to do what we did for the album, there's no way like that was basically, we'll talk about it more later, but that was basically my whole 2020.
Yeah.
That was all of my 2020 was the analyzing and the reorchestrating of One of Us is the Killer. And my big takeaway, I think to answer your question, I think it's basically there is order hidden and it's smashed. That's what it is. It's like broken apart and like jagged. This edge doesn't fit with this edge, but you kind of like put it in here, and then the logical part of what would happen after this part that was broken does show up, but later. Not here, not where you think it was going to be, right? Or where it should be. If I'm going to let me write a pop song. Let me write this song, right? The next logical part after this is you're supposed to do this part. Mm-hmm. It's there, but not there. Mm-hmm. It's like a three-quarters of a phrase later, or you stuck it before. Do you know what I mean? Like, so
that makes sense.
It's like a stitched. Yeah, it's like
so these are the things that you were able to like, kind of get out of it from dissecting it that most people wouldn't. They'd just be like,
That's what I got out of it.
Right.
That
okay,
it's like
interesting.
It's ordered, but it's smashed, and it was like completely like torn apart, and then kind of stitched together in a weird Frankenstein way, like the ear. You put the ear here, man, and then the ear's here. Right. That's what this is. But all the parts are there. Like it's just all in like it's like a fun house order.
We might as well follow that if you were just going to talk about it anyway. Like putting together this record is like when I think of when we're mixing stuff, it's very textural at times. Like there is the intensity part, and then we had to think about how does that level up with strings? And like we went back and forth, like how do we pan this?
Right.
What level does this come in? Because it doesn't make sense for us to go solid volume because you never did. There was so many dynamics in the music.
Right.
And then putting the notes and all that together.
Well, which instrument played what role? Who's pretending to be what, or not even pretending because it's not pretending. Like through the translation, is the cello the bass guitar? Or is it the drums? Right.
That's very interesting.
Right. Am I being Billy, or am I being Liam, or am I being whoever? Like, am I being you? Like, what role does that play, and when does it switch? And then that made rehearsals actually like very difficult too, because it's not like a rock band where like if somebody's driving, like if Billy's driving the train for that particular moment, right? Like historically in a rock band, right, the drummer's driving the train, and if you're off from the drummer, even though you're still wrong, it's you that's wrong, because it's you trust Billy to kind of do the thing, right? Mm-hmm. In a quartet, string quartet, with people taking turns being the drummer. That's a weird thing to kind of negotiate, especially amongst people who aren't used to playing in rock bands or aren't used to kind of like where the time is really dictated by the phrase and not by the actual grid. So that was a challenging thing to negotiate as well.
Yeah, we were going like, how one part was interpreted. Like the cello could be vocals at one point, it could be the guitars, it could be the drums, and then we're trying to pick out, is like, we're both huge fans of the record, and we wanted to stay somewhat true to the feel, so you're still kind of, I don't know, telling the same story, but further deconstructed. The glasses have been thrown further apart,
right?
But to make it recognizable, and to like we were talking about, even in the sound of the mix, we wanted it to like pumping guitar sounds, because when it comes in hard, we want it to feel that way, and then we back off. Like I'd back off the compressors and stuff when it came down,
right?
So it still tells that story, and it the way that the story is told on that, phenomenal.
Well, I guess the analogy, right, is kind of like you're literally translating. It's like if you have a book, right? Like there's Don Quixote, whatever, pulling books out of my ass, right? So like Don Quixote in Spanish, right? But then Don Quixote in like whatever, like Japanese, right? You can't use the same, I don't know Jap, but whatever. Whatever. You can't use the same exact words sometimes.
Right.
It won't fit.
Exactly.
Right? English to Spanish, whatever.
Right,
like it doesn't.
Right.
You can't go word for word for word
Doesn't
for word
read
for
the
word.
same. Yeah.
Doesn't read the same. Yeah. Right. So then that was a very, it was an awesome thing to actually just like get in there, and then and sometimes stressful because at the time I guess we thought we had deadlines.
Right.
we thought we had deadlines, and then we were like oh fuck, this is why did I, there were times where I was just like, why the fuck did I say yes to Ben?
Oh yeah, like usually when you do Jason.
So, I love you, man. But yeah, so that's the thing, right? So like for instance, like in Prancer, like I made the decision to, it's not in the record, like, so I dropped the level down like suddenly. But like when it's fuck you to try to just believe this, right? So like it's and actually the original, it's going like even more and more and more and more and more, and it's just this repeated phrase like that's like really pummeling you, but with strings, and then with nobody actually saying fuck you.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't work, and it got boring. Like it got like the early rehearsals we were playing this, and I was just like, this sucks. This is like
different dynamics.
I had to drop it to like bring it back up, so like I could repeat the phrase, and that's not in the song at all. Like it was soft, and then like I bring it back up to the end because I really wanted, even though you're not hearing fuck you, I still want you to hear fuck you.
Right.
So there was that.
There was like a big negotiation, and like I think it's interesting for Earl, because like heard the original record, started like arranging it, rehearsed it with the band, records it, and then he had to translate it again to me, what he was trying to do. I translate what I hear to him, and we're just throwing back these. If we're going with broken glass, we've like pounded it into sand at this point.
It's already sand.
Wow.
That's right.
That was wild.
It's interesting for me to hear that, because now that I'm working on a lot of soundtrack stuff, and that's like kind of a focus for me, I'm learning some of that same stuff. Whereas with a band, I would have been able to have a different level of intensity. If I want something to get huge or dynamic or whatever, it's so much dynamics have to be put inside, and building and removing and adding and like, reducing to nothing so that the next part's huge. It's like, even if it's not louder than, the part before, like you can only go so loud or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, sometimes it's all these dynamics and decisions you're making that with just drums and, where you're just like pummeling, and that's the point. There really isn't a lot of dynamic in some spot, like levels and things like that. You're just kind of, it's pretty interesting to hear you say you had to do that with this music in order to make it translate, because that makes sense to me now.
I would say this though, I think, but the music, the original Dillinger music, it's not that it didn't have dynamics, it just has dynamics as a rock band. And it has dynamics as guitar, bass, drums, vocals.
Yes.
Right? And then the way it's structured and the way it's like terraced is not the way you can terrace it with a string quartet or with like sort of orchestrational things that don't have like percussive
Yeah.
elements in that way, and also a vocal to tie. Like vocals change the whole picture always too, because you hear the words and it ties your meaning in, and sometimes a good vocal with a completely like a more static background can really deliver.
Right.
But then if you...
Well, that's the thing. I mean, with our music, the vocal is usually kind of the glue, because it goes over all the crazy different, measures and phrases and things like that. It kind of like you know the one and you know where the next one is based on the vocals, but like you can lock into the vocal a little more straightforward when all this craziness is happening underneath. So, like, it can be a little more of a palatable, like rhythm going over.
Right.
Over a complex phrase, or what's seemingly like a very complex phrase.
Right.
So that's the other thing that I knew would be kind of challenging, or I've got a lot of decisions to make.
Right. Actually,
I think that was one of my favorite parts of the record itself, was like how you interpreted all the vocal lines and then made these like beautiful soaring melodies over all the chaos. Like
Thank you.
It
yeah, I think
came together really well. Yeah.
But that was a challenge too on a nerding out point. I had to kind of like, and I got disagreements from my colleagues, from my friends and colleagues on the more classical end of things, because I would choose certain time signatures, because sometimes I didn't know. I'm like, should I structure the time signature over the vocal?
Right.
Or should I structure the time signature over what the drums are doing? Like, which one do I go for? And then the other wrinkle is time signature as readability for a string player. So there's like all these like different threads, which I definitely fucked up also. Like, it's not like I did this like right away. Like I definitely, and that's why this shit took a long time, and it was all of 2020.
Yeah, can we talk about that a little bit more? Like how this whole process started. I mean, 2020 was COVID, right? So what was going on exactly?
Yeah, how do we fully...
You called me. So you called me up like April of 2020, and you're like, how's your pandemic going along? I'm like, I'm fucking fucked like everybody else, man. Like, like mortgage just keep it on coming. I got no fucking money, and that's just what it is.
So I'm like, let me see how we can figure something out.
Yeah, and you were like, I think I have an idea, and I think, and it was already in your mind. You're like, if you did this, I think we can find you some money, and I think we can find you some like a platform.
Yeah.
For this to kind of like take off with it, to run with it, and it was in a weird way. I'm not glad about the pandemic, obviously, but I'm glad that I had that. I would never have been able to do
a unique circumstance.
It was a unique circumstance. It took a lot of deconstructing, a lot of mistakes, a lot of like going back and like getting it wrong, and then getting it a little righter, and getting a little righter, and then finally getting it to a point where it could be understood by a string quartet. All that stuff, and I don't think I would have had the time to undertake such a huge project like that deserves that time, because the music is so heavy. It's so fucking heavy, and like both in the metal way, but like in just in the broader sense, it's heavy music, and so the time required to really do something actually worthy, I guess, or whatever, or to do it right. It was I don't think I could do it now. It was a big thing.
Yeah, you learned your lesson.
Or maybe not. I mean, like, I learned things.
Yeah.
So maybe, I shouldn't say this. Maybe I could do it again, because I did learn.
Right. Well, like, people, I mean, honestly, people ask me, other guys in the band are in bands and making bands, and everyone's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to make it? I'm like, I have no interest in doing a band. I have no interest in doing that stuff anymore. I'm exhausted from Dillinger Escape Plan. Like, that was exhausting. Those albums were draining. They were mentally draining. They were abusive.
Yeah.
They were abusive. I put myself in unhealthy physical and mental situations making those albums, just as much as being on the road and doing sometimes 30 shows at that level of physicality, away from friends and family and all this stuff for months at a time. Like making those albums and the conditions of like performing those albums in the way that we did was probably at least equally physically and mentally just abusive on myself. And then there was like doing all the business and all that stuff. It was very draining. So like I know, and it's my music, and I, you know what I mean. So for you to have to transcribe all that stuff and figure it out, God, that must have been extremely draining, because I understand.
It was awesome at the same time. That's the thing. That's also,
it's very satisfying.
It's very satisfying.
To get the outcome of something like that. So
right.
And I was very excited to be able to hear it in the way through you, again. That was cool.
And we sat around like in the mixing phases. We're nerding out about the music, and it was about like been following you for years, and we're such big fans. It was about, we know the hard work that you put into it, and we wanted to introduce that in a new medium in like a certain way.
Right.
Like we went over like a month over the beginning of Prancer, because it kind of sets the tone. So the is actually one of the loudest things on the whole record, because we wanted it to have, this is the Dillinger feel.
Yeah.
And when you get into all the other parts, if you want to appreciate what they are, we needed those levels to be down and have that bass line to start from.
Yeah.
Because, like, I
remember talking to you a lot, being like, shit, it's not hitting the way it hits on the album.
Yeah.
And I needed to hit, is it me or is it the mix? Like, it was, that conversation was really kind of, like, not tense between us, but tense in terms of, like, needing to get it right? Like, I was just like, this is not right.
Yeah.
Whose fault is it? Like, is it the mix or is it my fault?
Always my fault. Just remember that.
Well, we put in the hours, though, to figure out how to get it that way. And it was never like, we were never contentious about it. We're just like, let's figure this out, let's get it going. But how do you turn string music into something that intense to hit? Because, like, it's not just the notes that you're playing. You were talking about a physical feeling when someone puts that through their speakers or their headphones, that it's going to have that physical effect of when, if like on some of the parts where you go down to like one guitar, it's a little more lo-fi, and then you get that full mix. We're trying to do that, but not use any lo-fi effects.
Right. No, the words are different, but the meaning has to be the same.
Yeah.
Like, it has to hit in the same way, even though the meaning is different. So that's what we spent a long time trying to figure that out. And I think we got it right. I'm pretty sure.
I hope so.
We got it right.